In this video, we're going to cover 6 question types that 100% are going to show up on your SAT and most students are approaching the wrong way. Then we're going to talk about 4 advanced math concepts that you may see at the end of the second harder math module. And then we're going to talk about some important test day tips and strategies and common mistakes to avoid, along with resource recommendations so we can set you up for success on your November SAT. Now, the first question type is what I like to call tricky transitions, and I see students miss these all the time because they either have no idea what they're doing or they're just straight up guessing based off what sounds right, and that's going to set you up for failure. But we're going to instead set you up with a simple 3-step process to make sure you get these right every single time. Now, you can tell you're dealing with these because you'll see answer choices like A and B. Step 1 is going to be to ignore the transition. Step 2 is going to be to check the clauses directly before and after. So Kajal did not make this discovery alone. This is an independent clause. If you are not familiar with the clauses, we will cover these later in the video, so just stick with me for now. But independent, it can stand on its own. Now we'll check after. He worked closely with his student, Rafael Llorente de No, to perform crucial investigations on the nervous system. This is also an independent clause. Now, if you have 2 independent clauses, you can immediately eliminate any answer choices that do not include period, semicolon, or rarely you can see a colon, because those need to be used to join those 2 independent clauses. If you did not have 2 independent clauses, you will have to pick this answer choice here with D, unless you have a list afterwards, in which case you need to use a colon. That's very, very rare. But at this point, we have 2 independent, so we can eliminate both of these. Now, the answer choice in this scenario that is right the vast majority of the time is B. So we always want you to check this first. And the way you can check this is you're going to put however back at the front of this sentence. And therefore, if you see a contrast between sentence 1 and sentence 2, which I've underlined in blue, that's going to tell you that B is correct. If there is a contrast between sentence 2 and sentence 3, that means that A would be correct. But here, we're talking about he is most known for proposing the neuron theory, which states the brain consists of individual nerve cells, which are separate and distinct. However, Cajal did not make this discovery alone. That makes sense. We have a contrast there. There is no contrast between sentences 2 and 3. That's how we can tell that B is correct, and those are the steps you need to follow for success on your test. Now, one of the advanced concepts that I think you will see at the end of that second harder module are percent increase and decrease questions. And these fool a ton of students because they think they are getting them right, when in reality they're missing them because they're not understanding the really important conceptual piece. So pause the video and see if you can figure this one out. Now, the really important conceptual piece you want to think about for percent increase or decrease is you can express it as 1 plus or minus P over 100. So in this case, it's going to be 1 plus P over 100 because we're doing an increase. So all we have to do is we're saying the result of increasing X by 650% is 180. So we can simply write this as X times 1 plus 650 over 100 is equal to 180 is 180. So this would give us that X times 7.5 equals 180. And then we can go through very easily and we can figure out that X is 24. The super common mistake is students instead will think this is, 6.5x is equal to 180, and then they'll find the wrong answer. Now, the next question type we're going to cover are notes. And you may be wondering, I thought we were covering hard questions in this video that students miss, and you may be saying to yourself, on the Blue Book practice tests, I can always just read this statement and almost always find which answer choice is correct without ever having to read the notes, and these are incredibly easy. I can get them right in 20 or 30 seconds. Well, the real SAT is not that easy with these questions. They have started to test accuracy much more, where you're being forced to go through and read them. So the approach we want you to take is see if you can take the shortcut. Read this, go straight to the answer choices. If 3 of them are very simply not answering the question, you never need to go and read the notes, but you will probably see at least a few of these where you need to read the notes. Or if you read the question and you're like, well, I don't know what this thing is that we're talking about, make sure you read all the notes before you go through because they're kind of setting you up for a trap. So for this one here, go ahead and see if you can work through and find the correct answer. Now, what we need to be really careful of here is we need to make sure, right, we're emphasizing the significance of the 1990 discovery to Platt's reputation. Now, at this point, I would say, well, I don't really know what that discovery is. And as we go through, it looks like a lot of these could be kind of answering that. So we need to go back to the notes. Now, right, the discovery is that the reputation is that he is supposed to be the first person to have discovered dinosaur remains. But the 1990 discovery makes it look like these other people had already discovered dinosaur remains before him. So that's what we need to kind of go through. And that's how we can see that B is correct. But until we tie together that information from the notes, we're probably going to miss this one. Evidence that Kotzian and Basotho peoples may have found M. carnissus phalanx as long as 1100 CE suggests that the plot may not have been the first person to have discovered dinosaur remains. That's perfectly accurate, and it answers the question. Now, A is very, very sneaky. Benoit challenged Plot's reputation for being the first person to have discovered M. carinatus remains. Well, he's just the first person to have discovered dinosaur remains, not this particular dinosaur. But that looks like it would be answering the question if we don't check the notes. As we go down to C, according to Benoit's analysis of 1990 discovery, indigenous peoples in southern Africa may have brought fossilized phalanx to the cave as long as 1100 CE. Well, this is totally accurate, but this isn't hitting it how it's affecting Plot's reputation of being the first person to have discovered it. D, in 1990, more than 3 centuries after Plot claimed in his books that he had found fossilized dinosaur bones, archaeologists uncovered evidence in southern Africa that disproved his claims. Well, this is not accurate because it's not that it disproved that he found them, it's that we're showing that he actually was not the first person to have discovered them, but that's where you have to be very careful with these on your real SAT. Now, the next question type you're definitely going to see on your test are support or weaken the claim questions, and these show up on every single SAT in the second harder module where they are very sciencey, and these gave students a ton of trouble on the October test. So we want to make sure you're prepared for how to deal with these. Now, there's a few common mistakes I see that students do with these. They will just read exclusively for the claim and try to answer the questions. Good luck finding the right answer doing that in the second harder module. Or they will just read through, find the claim, they'll think they kind of understood it, and they'll go to the answer choices, and they start flipping all the details around in their head, and they have to keep rereading the passage over and over, and they spend 3 or 4 minutes on this question, and sometimes they get it right or sometimes they don't. Instead, the approach we want you to do is take your first read through at a medium speed. You're getting oriented, you're getting used to what the information is, the relationships, identify the claim, and then you're going to take a second read, and then you're going to take shorthand notes around those important details that relate to the claim. Once you've armed yourself with the notes, now you can go to the answer choices in a productive way and find the right answer, and you're going to stop yourself from having to go back and reread over and over as you start reading the answer choices and you start forgetting exactly what the details were in the text. So go ahead and pause the video, see if you can work through and do that, and then we're going to kind of highlight the important information and talk through the important notes. All right, so now I've underlined the important details from the passage, both our conclusion and the details it relates back to, and written down my shorthand notes. We're going to talk through what I was thinking about to get these, right? So conclusion is pretty easy to find, right? We're concluding that G2 was during a period of cooler temperatures than G1. So we need to just go back through the text and see how they qualify what shows us cooler and warmer temperatures. We get that right in here. And what this is really just telling us is if we go through and we have a lower proportion of 18O to the 16O, it's going to be warmer. So I just wrote that part down here. And therefore, if we're looking for cooler, since they say the inverse holds true for cooler climates, well, if we want to see cooler, we want to have a higher proportion of 18O to 16O. Now we're armed with our information so we can very comfortably evaluate our answer choices. Now, C here is a tricky thing that shows up on the second harder module that we want you to be aware of. This is what you can think of as inverse evidence. What this is showing us is that G2 was during a cooler period by showing that G1 is in a warmer period as we go through. So an isotopic analysis of G1 ice core revealed a higher ratio of 16O to 18O than the ratio revealed in G2. So we're having a higher amount of what's going to show warm in G1 compared to G2. That's showing us that G2 is in a cooler period. So these are all important things to watch out for on those second harder support and weaken questions. Now the next advanced question type I think you will see at the end of that second harder module are system of equations questions testing you on no solution or infinite solution. We're going to focus on the no solution here. Now there's a few different varieties, but this is a common variety that you can do incredibly easily because you can actually just solve it in Desmos once we understand what we're conceptually looking for. If we are looking for no solution, this simply means we are looking for parallel lines. Now, what the SAT is trying to do by putting these variables in is stop most students from understanding that they could put this in Desmos. But all we need to do is we simply need to add a slider and we can solve through very easily, as you can see here. you're simply going to plug in any value for k, and once you see whichever answer choice gives you two parallel lines, that's your correct answer. Now, the next question type that I routinely see a lot of students miss, and it's actually very easy to get right once we think about it properly, are function questions. Now, the SAT kind of sets students up for failure here because in the first module, you can often solve function questions by just reading the underlined portion. So what happens is students struggle with the timing on the reading, so they decide, hey, I'm in the second harder module, the timing is really challenging, I'm just going to read this underlined portion and try to figure out what the function is. Well, in the second harder module, and you really want to do this also as well in the first module, it's all about understanding how it connects to other pieces in the passage. In the first module, you sometimes can get away with just reading this, but that's not going to happen in the second module. So what we want to do is very simple. Read through the first time, make sure you are really understanding what this sentence is saying, and that all you're looking for is how it relates or connects to the other parts of the passage. Whatever part of the passage you can really see it's connecting to is going to let you understand what its function is in the passage overall. So go ahead and pause the video here, read through, and see if you can figure this one out. Well, here we kind of have a little bit of tricky stuff going on. We can see first, right, this is relating to this first sentence in that we're talking about they're confident that it's going to explode, but they don't know when this will happen. So that's one connection we could see. But we also get a connection down to the final sentence because we're saying, right, they don't know when this will happen. So now they're trying to see if they can figure out to know when it's going to happen, but they actually cannot. And that's where we can see that C is correct. It's relating to that second part here. It's identifying the problem they're trying to solve, but they could not actually solve it. One of the other question types you're definitely going to see on your test are exponential growth and decay questions. And students simply miss these because they're not familiar with the formula and how it works. So anytime you see any sort of percent increase, where you're dealing with exponential expressions here, we simply want to understand that the part that comes before the parentheses is your starting value, or what you can think of as your y-intercept. You find your y-intercept when x is 0, so that eliminates both a and b. And what comes in the parentheses is showing you your percent increase or decrease. So this goes back to the percent stuff we talked about earlier. This is the same as 1 plus 28 over 100. Well, that's 1.28. That's where D is correct. Now, the next advanced question type I think you will see is some sort of tricky exponent question. So go ahead and pause the video, see if you can figure this one out. Now, if you see any variety that looks remotely like this, the core thing you're trying to think about is we're trying to solve for the variable where we have a base of n. So we need to be able to substitute n in for k, because once we have the same bases, we can cancel them out. So what we need to do is we need to use this expression, and we need to get this expression equal to k, and then we can substitute in. Now, the way that we can do that is we can raise this entire expression to the 5/2 power. We're just multiplying each of these powers. So that's going to give us n to the 25 over 6 is equal to k. Now we can substitute in. So this means we're going to have n to the 4a plus 1 is equal to n to the 25 over 6. Now we can cancel out those bases, and now we can solve through because we know that 4a plus 1 is equal to 25 over 6. We can simply cross multiply the 6. There's a bunch of different ways we could solve through this, but if we cross multiply, we are going to be left with 24a plus 6 is equal to 25. We'll subtract over the 6, that will give us 19. So we have 24a equals 19, or a is equal to 19 over 24, and that will give us our correct answer. All right, so I've just gone ahead and drawn out what this looks like. And now the really tricky part is students will be like, how am I supposed to possibly figure out what the radius is? Because I don't see the radius anywhere here. One of the things you always want to think about if you see root 3s, it's a good idea to start thinking about creating 30, 60, 90 triangles. So we want to think about a creative way we can create a 30, 60, 90 triangle, which is going to include the radius in some way. Now, if we split an equilateral triangle down the middle, we'll create two 30, 60, 90 triangles, but we're not quite at creating the radius in any way. But if from the center of the circle, we know from the center of the circle to any point on the circle is the radius. So if we do this, now we're going to have something we can solve through. We know all of these angle measures are going to be 60, so when we've split them down the middle, they're all going to be equal to 30 here. We know this is going to be equal to 90 when we split it down the middle, therefore, we know that these are equal to 60. Now we have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Now we can kind of work through and solve. So we're just going to use this one right here that I'm highlighting in blue. What we want to also think about, I'm just in this kind of blue font going to write in the proportions. We're going to think about those 30, 60, 90 proportions. You're given these from the SAT. It's going to be x, x root 3, and 2x. So that means 2x is ultimately going to be our radius. Well, what we now know is if this is 318, that means the x root 3 is equal to 1/2 of that. So x root 3 is equal to 159, or x is equal to 159 over root 3. We always want to rationalize these. So we're going to do that by multiplying by root 3 over root 3. That's going to give us that x is equal to 159 root 3 over 3. And therefore, that means 2x is going to be equal to 2 times 159 root 3 over 3. This is going to simplify down to 106 root 3. So that will give us that k is going to be equal to 106. If you'd like more practice with the types of questions that have been showing up on real SATs and you could see again on your November SAT, you can check out 7 additional question types at the end of the free trial to my Ultimate SAT course completely for free. We also have our advanced math courses available for purchase on our website. Now, the final question type you are definitely going to see on your SAT, and you will probably see this 2 to 3 times, so this can make a huge impact on your score, are sentence structure questions. These simply rely on you needing to be able to properly identify independent clauses, dependent clauses, and phrases, and understand the rules around joining them. If you can do that, it's a simple math equation. So here, if we ever see any of those punctuation pieces that can join 2 independent clauses, we're probably dealing with this type of question. We simply need to check the clauses. On July 23rd, 1854, a clipper ship called the Flying Cloud entered San Francisco Bay. That's an independent clause. Having left New York Harbor under the guidance of Captain Josiah Perkins Cressy and his wife, Navigator Eleanor Cressy, a mere 89 days and 8 hours earlier, this is all a phrase. This also includes some extra information. But the celebrated ship set a record that would stand for 135 years. This is another independent clause. Once we have those 2 independent clauses, we need to pick B. As I said, if you're not familiar with these, please check out the free trial to my Ultimate SAT course. It's going to cover those rules in depth and really help you on your test, and also provide help with system of equations and more advanced math questions. Now we're going to talk about really important strategies. Now for reading and writing for both modules, what I always recommend for students is to skip over the reading questions first and come back to them at the end. This means you're not going to be squeezed for time on transitions and notes, and if you're going to run out of time, it's going to be on some of the most complicated questions you will see. So do the vocab questions, jump up to question 14. If it's a grammar question, start there. If not, click next until you hit the grammar questions. Do all the other questions and come back to the reading questions. Ideally, you want to be circling back to the reading questions around the 18 or 19 minute mark. If we're really comfortable with our grammar rules, we should be able to do so. Now, important tips for reading and writing. Do not change your answers unless you know technical reasons for doing so. Students often talk themselves out of correct answers on the actual SAT because they really want to do well. And the other really simple tip I will give you is when you are dealing with those vocab questions, if you do not know the words, take your best guess and move on. I see tons of students keep rereading over and over and trying to figure out what the word is. You're probably not going to figure it out in the middle of the test unless you've taken Latin in school and you know a lot of suffixes and prefixes. So take your best guess, move on, flag the question. You can come back to it later if you have time. The worst thing you can do is sit on a particular question and then you look at the clock and panic sets in. And you start missing a lot of questions. For math, the very simple tip, do all the questions you know first and then circle back to the ones you don't feel as comfortable with. Let yourself see all the questions so you're not getting stuck on particular questions and running out of time when you could already be answering the questions. I do have some other videos where we go a lot more in depth about math and reading and writing as well. Now, final recommendations in terms of resources to help you prep. If you are watching this video and you have not done a good job prepping and you're just trying to cram with the most important topics that show up on every single SAT, I strongly recommend checking out my SAT crash course. If you are just struggling on the second harder modules, I strongly recommend checking out one of our advanced math courses. If you are out of practice tests and you want more practice with the types of questions that have been showing up on the real SAT and tests that are slightly harder than the real SAT, check out our practice tests. You can check out the first one for only $10 with the coupon code PREP10. If you have more time on your hand, I definitely recommend signing up for our Ultimate SAT course. It includes every single one of our SAT offerings. It's really going to help you have detailed lessons around any point of weakness. And after you take our practice test, you'll be able to see exactly what those weaknesses are. If you guys have any questions at all, please drop them in the comments.